Vanderstelt,
Present.
Councillor Martin,
Here.
Councillor Wall,
Present.
Councillor Van Tilborg,
Here.
Councillor McCreary,
Here.
Councillor Utley,
Here.
Councillor Weaver,
Present.
Councillor Sluss.
Present. Are there any members with a declaration of conflict of interest? Councillor Utley? Okay, no problem. Seeing none, members, have received a late delegation request for tonight's meeting on item 5.1. In order to proceed, we need a resolution to waive the rules to permit the delegation's request because it was received past the 9 o'clock a.m. deadline. This motion will have to carry on a 2/3 majority. Do we have somebody that would move that?
I have that resolution for you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Seconded by Councillor Utley. I'll read it as follows. The section 15-6-2 of Chapter 15 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code be waived to allow the following delegation after the 9 a.m. deadline. Tim Phillip and Nathan Etherington of the Brant Historical Society. And this is concerning item 5.1, Mr. Chair, the Crystal Cottage.
Thank you, Councillor McCreary. Is there any discussion on the motion to waive the rules? Seeing none, we'll call the vote.
The motion to waive the rules to allow the delegation to speak is approved with the 2/3 majority on a unanimous vote. Those in favor, Councillors Weaver, Vanderstelt, Utley, Sluss, McCreary, Martin, Van Tilborg, and Wall.
I was remiss at the beginning. Councillor Antosky is away this evening. She's at FCM doing city business for the FCM board, and the mayor is apparently quite ill. Okay, I'd now like to invite Tim Phillip and Nathan Hetherington of the Brant Historic Society to come forward to the delegates table. I remind you, you have 10 minutes inclusive of questions from the committee. And please have a seat and state your names for the viewing public, please.
Thank you, Councillor Councillor Sluss, members of council. My name is Tim Phillip. I'm the chair of the Brant Historical Society, and I've brought Nathan Etherington, who I'm sure you're all familiar, who does such great work at our museum. The reason I'm here is to support the resolution to provide funds to the Historical Society for moving a rather unique artifact, a building called known locally as the Crystal Cottage, from its present location, where it is in the way of a development, to a vacant lot which is owned by the Brant Historical Society right beside the museum at 57 Charlotte Street. Nathan will give you a little brief sketch of what the Crystal Cottage is, and then I will tell you what we're going to do with it.
Okay, so here's the history of the Crystal Cottage. As you can see up here in this top photo, this is the earliest photo that we have of the Crystal Cottage. It's taken during the Victory Parade during World War I, and the glass bottles in the structure are clearly there. Here below, we see a fire insurance map. This yellowed area is from the 1893 fire insurance map. They then had a craft project where you cut it out and glue it in. So this white is newer. And that was, so the changes occurred between 1893 and 1915. I reached out to the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Cultural Industries to ask if there are any other such buildings in the province. They replied, I expect this is relatively rare. I've asked Erin Samad at the Ontario Heritage Trust whether she is aware of any other properties in Ontario with this type of feature. She is not aware. She suggested, or they suggested pulling the Municipal Heritage Planners Network, which we did, and no other building like this has been found. So it was designated in 1985 after the homeowner made some improvements to it as well.
Thank you, Nathan. What's showing on the screen right now is a picture of the Crystal Cottage sort of in its original form. There have been a few changes to it. There's been a veranda on it and a small extension at the back and some minor improvements. It's actually a very nice property, but as you've heard from Nathan, it's a pretty unique property, and it's a designated heritage property. And in working with the developer who owns the property now, they of course need that space to build their development, And so the building is in the way, and we have a lot that's a vacant lot beside the museum. And it's an excellent opportunity for the interests of the developer who wants the land and the museum and the municipality to preserve a very unique artifact in our community that's part of our history. You've seen the pictures. It goes back to, World War I era, et cetera. And it's a well-known landmark that most people in Brantford, I think, would be familiar with. The plan is to, first of all, the Brant Historical Society has already signed documents, and we've effectively purchased the building from the developer. And the developer has made commitments that they're going to pick the building up and they're going to trundle it down Chatham Street and make a right turn onto Charlotte Street and deposit it in the lot right beside the museum. As part of that agreement, however, it's required that we have to put a foundation in. I mean, you can't just sit the foundation, or you can't sit this building on the slab. So we've been in touch with some contractors to try and find out whether this could be done and at what costs. And the result is the motion in front of you. I expect that this will probably be done sometime. Well, we're probably, assuming that we're successful with the resolution, we will be doing foundation work probably fairly soon, which you can all keep an eye from your windows of the back of City Hall, because it's very convenient. Once the foundation is built, the developer has hired a moving company. They're going to pick the building up and take it down and put it down there. And then there are a few things that we have to do. We have to change the heritage designation address, because clearly the address will change, and a few other things. But that's essentially what we're doing. And I just want to take a moment to thank Council for their consideration of this, because, Brantford, we often say this, but living here in Brantford, we sometimes, I think, lose the appreciation of the rich history that we do have here. We were like number 3 in terms of industrial output back around 1900, only after Montreal and Toronto. And there's been a tremendous amount of history that's occurred here. There has been a lot of development that's occurred here. And artifacts like this, once they're gone, they're gone. And this is an opportunity at a very reasonable cost to preserve part of our past and make it available for generations to come. So that's my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Anybody on the committee have a question? Councillor Wall?
The space next to the, sorry, through you, the space next to the chair, thank you, next to the museum now. What's there?
Nothing. It's there used to be a building there, but I think there's some concrete in there, but it's effectively a vacant lot.
Okay. Pending approval of this, and the foundation gets built, there's nothing that's going to stop them from placing the house onto the foundation?
I've not been given any reason to believe that that's true. We've got experienced movers have been contracted to do this. Building a foundation is not rocket science, so we should have no trouble doing that. It's just simply a case of picking the building up, moving it, setting it down. Now, there will be some minor damage incurred in the move. I mean, they may have to take a chimney down or some things, and certainly the veranda will have to come off during transport and things. But the idea is that when they put it down and when they're finished, the building will be exactly as it looks right now.
Awesome. So that leads to my final question. The current property, I remember I've seen the inside of it. I don't remember being in the backyard, but there's no extensions or expansions. It's all one solid brick structure.
It's a brick structure. I think there has been a minor expansion at the back, but the mover feels that can be moved easily. There's nothing around it. The building sits by itself on its own lot.
Okay. I'm really excited about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Weaver?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming, and I have 2 questions. First question is, what does the Historical Society plan on doing with the building once it's been placed? Is it going to be turned into a museum? Is it going to be rented out? Like what type of?
I actually haven't got a good answer for you for what we're going to do with the building. The board has yet to make that decision. In the discussions at the board, we've been very excited about getting this building, and there have been lots of talks about it, using part of it for administration space, maybe opening up part of it for museum. Certainly in the basement that we're or the foundation that we're building, one of the big needs the museum has is for storage, and there'll be a place for storage. Renting it out, there are a lot of possibilities for the building. We haven't made that decision yet, and I don't want to preempt the board's decision. I will say that regardless of what happens with the building, the important thing that I think that needs to be kept in mind is that the building will still be there. It will be preserved, whether it's part of the museum, whether it's a rental unit, whatever it is, the building will still exist and it'll be available for future generations.
I can't tell from the photograph, but is there a basement currently at that location?
There's a crawl space that's under there where some of the mechanicals are.
So given the fact that you do need storage space, are you putting in a full basement then?
Yes.
Perfect. If you put a full basement in, the inside can be modified because it's not the heritage, it's the outside, correct?
I'm sorry?
So in order to put a basement in, you'll need to put some stairs into the building. The outside of the building is what's the heritage, so that's fine to be able to do that type of work.
There's currently access to the crawl space in the building, so that's already within the structure. And then what we're planning on doing is in the foundation that we're building, we're planning on putting an exterior door to the foundation so that we can get access. So that, for instance, if it is rented to tenants or to a law firm or whomever, we would still have access to the basement for storage.
And so you talked about how you're excited about this. When was the last time the city was involved in moving a structure like this? There was one that I recall happening.
I think the Thomas House would be the last example of a house that was moved in Brantford, which I think was in the 90s.
It's been a long time.
So with the excitement, I hope that there'll be some type of celebratory event when it's placed and ready to be opened, and I hope that you would invite council to that.
Well, I'm not sure that you can pick up a building and trundle it down the street without creating some kind of excitement. So I'm pretty sure that we're going to plan some kind of an exciting event, and that we'll invite the public to for the preservation of this wonderful building.
Councillor Utley, there's about 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very quick. How big an attraction are heritage homes in Brantford to the film industry? I'm not sure if you can answer that or not, but we have a lot of film companies coming to Brantford to film in areas where there are heritage buildings. And I just wonder if you had any statistics on that.
I don't have any information. I would suggest economic development might have a better idea than that in terms of the Historical Society.
Right. I hope it lures more film companies in.
If somebody wants to film in the Crystal Cottage, I'd be happy to talk to them.
Thank you for your presentation, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Councillor McCreary, would you like to move your item?
Yes, indeed, I will, Mr. Chair, and the seconder is going to be Councillor Utley. And this is a very lengthy resolution, so I hope the chair may be rather tardy in pushing the start button. There it goes. Okay. Whereas City Council passed bylaw 6-85 on January 21, 1985, which designated the Crystal Cottage at 35 Chatham Street under the Ontario Heritage Act as having architectural and historical value or interest. And whereas the Crystal Cottage displays unique architectural features such as one course of green glass bottles located above arch radiating voussoir over windows and entranceway enclosed in one layer of red brick top and bottom, and the name Crystal Cottage ornamentally inset in the gable of the cottage. And whereas an application by Market Street Developments, Inc. to amend the zoning bylaw and for site plan approval has been received by the Planning Department for lands on Market Street, which also includes 35 Chatham Street for the redevelopment of an apartment building with ground floor commercial uses. And whereas the preservation of the city's designated and architecturally significant and historical buildings is a key objective of City Council, and preventing demolition of designated properties is to be avoided. And whereas Market Street Developments, Inc. has agreed to sell the Crystal Cottage to the Brant Historical Society for $10, and they have further agreed to relocate the Crystal Cottage at their own expense to a vacant lot known as 53 Charlotte Street, with the owner, Brant Historical Society, agreeing to pay at their own expense for the site grading and site work, servicing connections, and related work to receive the Crystal Cottage. And whereas the relocating of the Crystal Cottage to 53 Charlotte Street will include municipal approvals, including but not limited to an application for site alteration, redesignation under the Ontario Heritage Act, an application for a minor variance to recognize deficient parking on site or the payment in cash in lieu of parking, road closure costs, possible costs to address overhead hydro lines, and street tree removals. And whereas the Brant Historical Society will be providing a site for the future protection of the Crystal Cottage and are unable to pay the above noted municipal approval fees, and whereas the City of Brantford has a rich history and many cultural and built heritage assets that contribute significantly to civic pride, quality of life, and tourism potential within the local community, and whereas the City of Brantford endeavors to support local not-for-profit heritage organizations financially through the Community Cultural Investment Program, Cultural and Built Heritage Funding Program, and city grants. And whereas the approved City of Brantford Economic Development and Tourism Strategy supports the continued implementation of the municipal cultural plan in order to increase the creative capacity of the city and further develop local arts, culture, and heritage opportunities. And whereas the Brant Historical Society is unable to pay for the construction of a sound foundation and related work identified below for the relocation of the Crystal Cottage, and whereas intake for the Cultural and Built Heritage Funding Program does not open until May the 1st of this year, with first installments of grants typically issued in Q3. Now therefore be it resolved, A, that council waive all municipal permit and application fees that the Brant Historical Society may incur in the relocation of the Crystal Cottage to 53 Charlotte Street, and B, that $50,000 be allocated to the Brant Historical Society from the Council Priorities Reserve to be used for eligible costs related to the relocation of the cottage or eligible costs or third-party costs for parts and labor for site work, tree removal, landfill, or any debris, site servicing, installation, and connections for water, sanitary, electrical, and gas, pouring the concrete foundation and insulating the foundation, replacing the basement doors, stairs, and windows, replacing the HVAC or furnace, installing an electrical panel, obtaining permits and inspections, site grading and landscaping, including sod, and constructing a driveway. And C, subject to the execution of a Cultural and Built Heritage Funding Program grant agreement in a form approved by the city solicitor or designate, the Brant Historical Society be allocated up to $50,000 less ineligible HST from the Cultural and Built Heritage Reserve in lieu of a formal application to the 2020-21 Cultural and Built Heritage Grant Program to be used for items outlined in Section B of the resolution, and to be paid upon completion of the project and submission of a final report as required by the grant agreement. And D, that the General Manager of Community Development execute the grant agreement in accordance with the execution of routine documents bylaw. That's it, Mr. Chair, and how am I doing for time here?
You're 30 seconds over. But
You know we have 5 minutes tonight at council, right?
Well, no, it's still 4 minutes, I believe, but
No.
your time doesn't start until the resolution has been read. So
Excellent.
you're good to go.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the reason this is before us tonight is because speed is of the essence. You heard from the delegation that it's important that we get everything done in advance to permit the work to proceed on the new site so that the building can be picked up and moved there to meet the developer's timelines, which are getting shorter by the day. We're aware that there's ample funding in the two funds. And for clarity, I know I've been asked this a number of times. For clarity, the total give by the City of Brantford is in the amount of $100,000, up to $100,000, 50 coming from two separate accounts. And I just want to say, Mr. Chair, that the developer is fully on board with this. The developer is going to be writing a pretty big check to move this, and we think it's probably going to be in the vicinity of $500,000, which really indicates a commitment to the preservation of heritage in this community by this developer who's not even from here. I think there's a lesson here for us, and I know councillors have often been conflicted in past about the preservation of heritage at somebody else's expense. And here we see an opportunity where we've got two willing partners and a third partner in the corporation of the City of Brantford that are all working to make this happen. So I would hope that everybody would support this tonight. Beyond tonight, there's an awful lot of work to do, and city staff are going to be front and center of that. And I believe Mr. Moore's lead on this project. I think I mentioned that to Mr. Moore in advance of tonight. And we certainly appreciate the input of all these folks over here tonight who've done so much so far and so much more to go. As Tim said and Nathan said, this is going to be a great asset for the Brant Museum and Archives. It's going to help with their sustainability because, as you know, Mr. Chair, so much of what museums do in the City of Brantford is hampered by their need to provide bricks and mortar, and it's always, there's always somebody that needs to be paid, and it's so difficult for them to tell their stories. This is going to help that out, and I'm hoping that this will be the first of many initiatives that we bring forward, which are going to help further sustainability for our partners.
Thank you, Councillor McCreary. Are there further speakers? Councillor Martin?
Thank you. Yeah, I usually vote against heritage designations when it's not the landlord's wish. I'm happy to support this because we have an owner that's willing to put a lot of money on the line to move this building and a willing recipient that is going to look after it. It's not going to be a case of it being moved and then it fall into disrepair. I think the museum will do a good job maintaining this, and I look forward to seeing it in its new location.
Further? Councillor Wheeler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if perhaps this might be a friendly amendment, but this is pretty significant. As Councillor Martin said, we have a developer that's going to be putting out a lot of money to help us continue with our heritage in the city. So I'm almost wondering if it wouldn't warrant a letter on behalf of council to that developer, thanking them for their support. Okay. So I think that would be appropriate. So perhaps that would be a friendly.
I think that's a great idea. Does that require an amendment? No. Okay, the clerk's noted it. It will happen. Councillor Utley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, is the area where the Crystal Cottage is being relocated a heritage area?
Through the chair, Paul Moore, General Manager of Community Development. No, it's not currently. The building, the Crystal Cottage itself, will have to be redesignated as it will have a new address now. So that's one of the processes that we'll have to undertake in relocating this building.
Good, thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, I'd just like to thank and congratulate Councillor McCreary. A lot of people talk about how we should save things and how we should do all these wonderful things, but he did something about it, and I think that's commendable, and congratulations, Councillor McCreary, you got one through. Having said that, I'll call the vote.
Item 5.1, Crystal Cottage, 35 Chatham Street, with the friendly amendment, is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Councillors Weaver, Vanderstelt, Utley, Sluss, McCreary, Martin, Van Tilburg, and Wall.
There are no, notices of motion, so we'll go into bylaws. Councillor Vanderstelt, could you please move the first and second reading?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Martin, and bylaws first and second reading that leave be given to the mover and seconder to introduce the following bylaws for first and second reading. Bylaw preamble 30/2020 bylaw to authorize the execution of agreements individually dated and listed on Schedule A attached here to 1. Agreement between the Corporation of the City of Brantford and the Brant Historical Society regarding the relocation of the Crystal Cottage. Special City Council March 3rd, 2020. 31/2020 bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Brantford with respect to the special meeting held on March 3rd, 2020.
Does anyone wish either of the bylaws to be separated? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. First and second reading.
First and second reading of the bylaws is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Councillors Weaver, Councillor Vanderstelt, Councillor Utley, Councillor Sluss, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Martin, and Councillor Van Tilburg, noting Councillor Wall is out of the room at the time of the vote.
Third reading, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move, seconded by Councillor Wall, that bylaw 30/2020 and bylaw 31/2020 be taken as read a third time, finally passed and signed by the mayor and clerk.
Any discussion? Call the vote.
Third reading of the bylaws is carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Councilors Weaver, Vanderstelt, Utley, Sless, McCreary, Martin, Van Tilburg, and Wall.
Special council meeting is now adjourned, and we will go directly into operations and admin meeting for March 3rd. The invocation has been completed. Roll call has been taken by the clerk. Yes. Declarations of conflict of interest. I understand, Councilor Utley, you have a conflict with 6.17 and 6.19 of tonight's agenda.
I do, Mr. Chair.
Could you please state your
I
conflict?
will. Both items involve both Brantford Rotary Clubs. I'm an honorary member of the Rotary Sunrise Club, which is involved with the beer and garden and parking, and I volunteer at the Rotary Air Show.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Utley. Are there any further conflicts? Seeing none, at this point we'll separate items to be discussed. The automatically separated will be item 6.11, KPMG Customer Service Review and Overview. Item 6.1.2, Update to Ice Jam Study. 6.1.7, Community Charity Air Show. And 6.19, Brantford Canada Day Celebration 2020. Are there further items to be separated for discussion? Councilor Martin?
Yeah, I'd like to separate item 6.1.5, Mohawk Lake and Mohawk Lake Cleanup and Rehabilitation Update.
Further items? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. Could I get a mover and a seconder for those not separated? Councilor Weaver, Councilor Wall. Discussion? We call the question.
The items that were included in the vote are item 6.1.3, Climate Change Action Plan Q1 2020 Update and Clean Brantford Campaign, 6.14, Ballantyne Drive Traffic and Speed Limit Bylaw Amendments, 6.16, Rogers Telecommunication Tower Lease, 6.18, Library and City Shared Services Agreement for Human Resources Services, 6.10, Review of Operational Services and Park Services Departments, and 6.2, Wastewater Operations 2019 Annual Summary Report, 6.22, 2019 Annual Summary Report for the City of Brantford Water System, and 6.23, all minutes carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Councilors Weaver, Vanderstelt, Utley, Sless, McCreary, Martin, Van Tilburg, and Wall.
Okay, this evening we have one registered delegation for items appearing on tonight's agenda. The delegation will have 10 minutes inclusive of questions of committee members. In keeping with the City of Brantford procedural bylaw, please ensure all comments are directly related to the matter before the committee. When your name is called, please come forward to the delegates table, state your name for the clerk, and commence your remarks. Our delegation this evening is David Runner and Sherry Kerr with the Community Air Show. Please. Welcome, folks. You have 10 minutes inclusive of questions, and when you're ready, please begin by stating your name for the record, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'm David Rohr, Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum.
Sherry Kerr on behalf of the Rotary Club of Brantford.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Councilors. It's a pleasure to be with you today. We'll give you an update on the 2019 Community Charity Air Show and our presentation. Next slide. This year, 2019, we had your community has a very unique event, and it's one that is based on the goodwill from four parties in particular, being the City of Brantford, the County of Brant, the Rotary Club of Brantford, and the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum. And we put an event on, which is the only one in Canada, the only air show in Canada that does not charge an admission. Last year, we had attendance in the area of about 14 to 15,000, which is a record attendance over the history of this show. On your first show many, many years ago, I flew in bad weather when the United Way had it. It wasn't as successful as last year, I can assure you, but it has grown every year and become a very unique and special event, family-centered, and very well received in the community. This year, in 2019, our revenues were in the area of about 119,000. Our expenses were up to 88,000, and that was an increase over last year, or 2018, and that was primarily due to increase in logistics and an increase in some of the performers as we brought in some very special and unique performers last year. Overall, it was a successful year. The proceeds of the air show are split evenly and go in Brantford. They go to the Rotary and Lansdowne House and Boys and Girls Club of Brantford and the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum. Overall, we had rising costs in logistics, more people. We need more porta potties, more people to keep them clean. The fencing, there was more fencing required this year for crowd control, and we had increased costs in policing and security. As I said, it was a very well-received event, though. What goes on in the show basically is not possible without the support in kind from the City of Brantford and the support from the county. But this year, the essence of our report and request is that we're asking for an additional $6,000 cash support from the city to cover the increased insurance to put the event on, which is something that the Warplane Museum has covered for the last 2 years. It was covered when the Rotary Club was running the event alone. We, as a museum, the airplanes we provide, it is the only air show that the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum actually participates in. And you see things in Brantford that you will not see anywhere in Canada in terms of the performances. For example, the Lancaster, one of two in the world flying, the only one in Canada, flew here with the B-29 a year before last. Last year did a heritage flight with the NORAD CF-18. Again, those were the only, that was only seen here in Brantford. So from grand to great is what this show is and what it's becoming. And this year, 2020, promises to be the same. The museum provides our airplanes at cost. We don't charge any extra for our airplanes, and in fact, we provide a lot of support at no cost to the city. Our staff works in support of the air show, and the cost of the museum are about $15,000 a year for that, which we do not expect to be compensated for. We've been a great supporter of this show from day one and continue to be and want to be in the future because we think it's a tremendous show. You've all had the presentation, so I won't go forward in detail, but I'm going to turn it over to Sherry just to talk about what the Rotary does and the great partnership that we have.
So in terms of Rotary Club of Brantford, as you know, we've been working together with the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum for the past 3 years and with the city and the county for many years before that, probably 12 years. We've always considered the Community Charity Air Show to be a partnership with the county and the city, and we always advertise it that way as a partnership between the four organizations. And in terms of Rotary, obviously we support the event coordination, the logistics. It's mostly Rotary that's design, set up, clean up, organizing all of the vendors, etc. Our volunteer management is done through Rotary. The hospitality, supporting our pilots when they come to town, making sure they're welcomed, certainly ensuring that they take full advantage of many of the amenities that there are in our town for our pilots. We happen to see them out and about. Liaising with the community, with the city, and with the county, and our many, many sponsors. Our sponsors are very important to us. Many of our sponsors are local business people who continue to sponsor the air show, and certainly having them on board is a major part of what the Rotary Club is able to do for the event. Our goal is to continue to have the event as a free admission. We do charge parking, as you know, but our goal has always been to keep it a family event. If you're in the crowd, you see that it is a family event. Many seniors come out, many bringing their grandchildren, many it's a family day to come out on a Wednesday and just enjoy a great day on the ground with not only the static, but the flights that are offered, and certainly the military is one of the spectacular pieces for all the kids there. So certainly that's our goal, to keep it a free admission, a small parking, and to keep it a family event. And there's a lot of suggestions made about what we could do to make more money. Some of them don't quite mesh with the family event piece of it. So as Dave said, we are asking to go back to the days when there was a cash sponsorship from the city as well to help offset our costs, so that we can keep it as that family event with very little cost for spectators to join us.
I might also add that 2020 is the 75th anniversary of Victory in Europe on May 8th, and we'll celebrate that at the air show, as well as it's the 80th anniversary of the British Commonwealth Air Training Program, of which Brantford was a base. And the other thing is, I think you have a homegrown boy flying in the Snowbirds this year, who comes from Brantford.
Yes.
So we're looking forward to a good show. We're looking forward to the continued goodwill and great partnership that we have here. And with that, I think we're open for any questions you may have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I've got two on the list so far. Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for everything you do. The Warplane Heritage has been a great supporter of this show since day one, and we appreciate that. Has the museum decided which aircraft are going to be coming to this year's event?
Well, normally we just about bring everything. The Lank will be flying. A D-Day veteran C-47 will be opening the show with jumpers. And then we'll have, this year, we hope to, we've been 10-year restoration on a Royal Canadian Navy Avenger, which we hope to debut at the air show this year. Of course, the B-25 is a favorite. PBY, the cancel is good. And because it's a British Commonwealth Air Training Program 80th anniversary, we hope to have a 6 or 7 Harvard formation in salute to that program.
Wonderful.
So, and then we'll have many more on static. So.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you very much.
Councillor Weaver?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's start off with Lance Kelbeck says hi. I have a question about your timing of your events. So I haven't been to the event in several years because I work full time. So the event starts during the day. What's the reasoning behind your start time?
The start time or the day? Because I know Wednesday's always been a question as well.
If you'd like to answer that question, if people have it, I'd be happy to hear it. But I'm really concerned about, not even concerned, I'd just like to know about their timing.
Strategically, the Wednesday before Labor Day helps us get the Canadian military and the Snowbirds, the CF-18, etc. It's a great stop for them. So, and certainly in terms of expenses for other pilots and performers, Wednesday isn't a busy day for them on a schedule. So that's why we've always kept to the Wednesday before the Labor Day weekend. In terms of timing, we've changed that time several years in a row. We used to start 1, we did start at 3. At the end of the day, our crowds are pretty much equal. So it's just been a matter of trying to find that perfect time to make sure we can get everybody on the grounds. Obviously, flying into the night sky is a different game, and certainly Dave can talk a little bit more about the logistics in the air space when we get into night flying.
Yeah, historically, of course, the United Way started it on Wednesdays. What's unique about the show is that it is a midweek show. It's a one-day show. It's free of charge. And we do piggyback on the fact that many of the performers are already in the area because of the Canadian International Air Show on Labor Day weekend in Toronto. And I think that was the rationale for it. We've kept that. We've honored that because it is successful. And as a family event, it's the last week of summer, so to speak, and a lot of families take the opportunity to take the day off with the family and come to the event.
I will also be trying to take the day off this year so I can attend. So thank you very much for coming.
Councillor Wall?
Awesome. Yeah, I'll echo what some of the other councillors said. Thank you. You guys run a phenomenal event. I think there's few events that happen in our community that generate the same kind of buzz that the air show does. So thank you. I want to talk about parking. So you mentioned that you charge for parking. I'm curious how much it costs to park and how often you evaluate that cost.
Well, it's $20 to park. And we raised it 3 years ago from 15 to 20. And we raised $45,000 in the last 2 years from parking. And we're hoping to keep it at that because, you know, if you have 4 people per car, for example, you know, $5 per car per person is not a very expensive proposition for a family. And that's what we're trying to do, is keep it family-based and affordable. So I don't anticipate that we want to look at increased costs, although our costs and control is very important to us, and we need to always keep an eye on that so that we do have a net profit for the charitable work that we want to achieve as a group. So, but right now, no plans to change the rate.
So not to focus too much on parking, just a couple of questions. Have you ever considered a per person parking versus?
Like a gate?
Yeah.
We've talked about it, but you know, the committee is, there's such a great committee of volunteers, and they've been in the community a long time, and they're really not too keen on it.
Any numbers that show, is there, in your advertising, are you encouraging people to commute to fill a car versus to have, is parking an issue? Do you ever run out of parking?
Parking is an issue, and control of parking and volunteers to control parking and to collect the parking fee is a challenge. And this year we're actually increasing the volunteer involvement from the museum, taking many more of our volunteers. We want to have 30 volunteers in parking, of which 5 or 6 will be dedicated just for the collection of the fee, not the actual direction of the parking. But we're beefing up our parking volunteers. And we're looking at additional space that could park 3,000 or 4,000 cars.
So even to have more parking?
Yes.
So then my final question regarding parking is I remember last year during the air show just hearing some hubbub about people parking on Colburn or on the highway and then walking to the air show. So can you just, what was that about?
Well, that was about basically more people coming than our security and police could handle. Between the OPP and the city, basically we were overwhelmed with success, I suppose would be the right way to put that, but it was lost revenue to the event. And so parking is a key issue that we're reviewing both with the OPP and with the city police. And we think that with the arrangement that we're envisioning for 2020, we will be able to control that much better.
Then what are other methods? Is there any, like, you have a partnership with the city on this clearly, so it's my first time, forgive me for all the questions. Is there a special shuttle bus that comes out of the bus station that brings people, or are there other alternative transportation options, et cetera?
Yeah, part of the city's contribution, the in-kind contribution, is the city buses. So we advertise departure from the terminal downtown and then returning. So we do really encourage, particularly city folks, to get on the bus and come out. Then from there, there's no cost, but trying to make sure we catch them at the gate. It's by donation. And, you know, we have a number of folks who will say, I didn't park, so here's my $20 at the gate, which is great for us. So we do really encourage everybody to bring the bus out from downtown, and it certainly will save with that congestion, which has been an issue in the past.
Well, as I said at the beginning, you guys are doing a fantastic job, and I'm happy to support it. Thank you so much.
We're actually out of time, but Councillor Vanderstel, you had a question, so we'll squeeze that in.
Thank you, Chair. I don't break the rules.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe, Councillor Weaver, you have an amendment. Are we not on the floor yet? Sorry. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Okay. Thank you for your presentation. I guess I'm out of order here.
Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
very
Chair.
much for your
Thank you,
presentation.
councillors.
Okay, we're going to consider now all the items that were separated for discussion purposes. And can I get a mover and a seconder to put them on the floor? Okay. Councillor Vanderstel, Councillor Martin. The first item to be dealt with is item 6.1.7, the Community Charity Air Show. And I believe you have an amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I do have an amendment. Should I proceed, or do you want to see if
Yes.
there's any speakers? Okay.
Proceed.
So this item is moved by myself and wholeheartedly seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Vanderstel. I Item 6.17, amendment, 2020 Community Charity Air Show, financial impact none. That the following be added to Clause E, that additional funds for the Community Air Show in the amount of $6,000 be funded from the Council Priority Reserve Fund.
Would you like to speak to it?
I really think it speaks to itself. I had conversations with most members of council about this item. So I think this is something that I think is appropriate for us to support with the amount of people that this event actually takes in. There's lots of people in our city and the county actually go to this event. So
Further discussion on the amendment. Councillor Wall?
Again, from what I remember, this is the first time I voted on anything regarding the air show. Is this an amendment, a permanent thing, so that the next time they come with us, we won't have to do this, or is this a one-time deal for this?
I believe it's a one-time. We're not permanently amending this, correct? It's one time.
Thank you.
Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a wonderful cause. This is a show that's free to the public, and the public take advantage of it. I was at the last year's, I've been at every air show, and last year's was the most well-attended yet. It was phenomenal, the number of people that were on the tarmac at the airport. And it takes an army of volunteers to put this show on, so I think the least the city can do is to help with a little bit of funding to cover off the insurance. So I'll be supporting this. I thoroughly enjoy the air show every year, and I encourage people to pay the $20, park, and go to the show and see it, and don't go on a side street or try and watch from Rust Acres Road, because you miss the announcer. And that adds so much to the performances that are going on above you that it's worth it to do the little bit of extra effort and actually go into the airport and enjoy the show properly. And I know they get a lot of donations in the donation barrels. I think that's wonderful that people enjoy the show enough that they feel that they want to make a donation to ensure that it continues. And I think this is a small step that the city can take, and I'll be supporting it wholeheartedly.
Further speakers to the amendment? Seeing none, did you want to wrap the amendment? No. We'll call the vote on the amendment.
The amendment to item 6.1.7 2020 Community Charity Air Show is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Councillors Weaver, Vanderstelt, Sluss, McCurry, Martin, Van Tilborg, and Wall.
Any discussion on the motion as amended? Councillor Vanderstelt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Procedural question for you. I have 4 minutes from the start of this point for questions of either staff or the delegation. Is that correct? 5 minutes. We haven't moved to 4 minutes yet.
It's 4 minutes in this format. It's 5 minutes at council.
Oh, understood. But I can ask a question of either staff or the delegation that was just in. No? Only staff?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Historically, whoever, I guess, I'm not sure, Brian, would you be answering this? Historically, what have been the city contributions to the air show over the years? Either in cash or in bus services or other supports?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is a business unit set up for the air show in the amount of $21,500. And of that money, we provide services from policing through fire, transit, some park services in there as well, and I believe some facility costs, building facility costs as well.
So historically, have we been asked to provide cash in the past before to cover insurances or whatever other costs there might be?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe a few years ago we actually have covered the insurance for the show, and then at some point there was a decision, I believe, not to cover it any further. So we have done that in the past.
So we provide police services, fire, and ambulance for the air show?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Through city?
Through city, in conjunction with the county. The county also provides some emergency services as well.
And was this, as far as we know, are there any cash contributions from the county based on their involvement in the process?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of that. I'm not sure of that.
Okay. Do we have any ballpark idea of how many volunteer hours go into this program every single year as a charity, and where the contributions go? Does anybody have a ballpark idea of how much time we put into this?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't believe city staff would. I would assume the Rotary Club would have an idea. I personally do not. I do not know how many volunteer hours.
I believe the number is stunning, but I would certainly like to know. Yeah, I'll support this 100%, and I'll watch the contributions for next year as well.
Councillor Wall?
I believe they mentioned almost 15,000 people attending the event, and it just got me thinking about, with Canada Day, what we did with waste diversion. I was wondering if there's any, what do we do for this event in that regard?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not really aware because we don't really provide that service for the air show. It's actually run and organized through the Rotary Club, so city staff do not get involved with regards to the waste diversion of that show.
We can, though, request the SPAC or their subcommittee, through you, Mr. Chair, Brian Hutchings, CAO, we can ask the SPAC through their subcommittee called the Green Team, who does the Canada Day activities, maybe connect with the Rotary Club to see if they can provide the services. They are looking at for other venues as well.
Is that something you need direction to do, or can I just request it?
I don't think I need direction to do that. No, we'll do that.
Fantastic. I think, I'm sure they're doing a great job. I just know that the SPAC and the Green Team are passionate about this, and it's volunteer-based as well, right? So, okay, thank you.
Further discussion on the motion as amended? Councillor Martin?
Yes, thank you. Partly in answer to Councillor Wall's question, I spoke with someone on the Airshow Committee and suggested they get in contact with Councillor Antosky to solicit the Green Team to help out with garbage at the site. And they really appreciated the suggestion because garbage is one of the big things that they have to deal with. And the presence of the Green Team would certainly help enhance the event. And you mentioned that the city covered the insurance for a number of years, and we stopped doing that. My understanding was it was cheaper for the insurance to be done through the city. Is that something we could revisit and see if there'd be cost savings by having the city secure the insurance instead of paying for them to secure it at a higher price?
I'm going to answer this, but I'm going to also, I've been briefed very briefly on this matter. I understand the city did provide the insurance, but our risk management unit felt that the city shouldn't for risk purposes continue to provide the insurance because it makes the city possibly liable by providing the insurance. So we'd be named if there's any suits or any issues regarding it. So I understand that was decision by risk management directed not to cover the insurance anymore. It was cheaper. Obviously, we have a bigger umbrella insurance than Rotary or the volunteer group would do. But we can go back and I can find out for council, maybe provide a memo to you about the details of that insurance and why it was canceled and whether we can go forth. I can provide that to you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, we'll call the vote on the resolution as amended.
Item 6.1.7, 2020 Community Charity Air Show as amended is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Councillors Weaver, Vanderstelt, Sless, McCreary, Martin, Van Tilburg, and Wall.
Next item for discussion is 6.1.1, and we do have a presentation on this. It's the KPMG Customer Service Review Overview. I would ask that Aaron Wallace, Director of Corporate Initiatives and Community Strategies, Bruce Peaver, and Tom Malafant of KPMG to come forward to the delegates table. Please state your name for the viewing public and commence your presentation. As a reminder, you have 10 minutes inclusive of questions.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Bruce Peaver. I'm a partner with KPMG. And to my left, I have my colleague, Tom Malafant, who is a senior manager in our firm.
And good evening, I'm Aaron Wallace. I'm Director of Corporate Initiatives through the chair, two members of committee.
I'll keep my remarks very brief, but council may recall that improvements to our customer service was identified as the number one opportunity for the city during the service review conducted by KPMG last fall. And so as part of that work, what KPMG was able to do, which we'll present for your consideration tonight, was put together a list of recommendations to improve customer service in the city of Brantford. We think this is a timely and an excellent opportunity with the opening of the new city hall next year, and of course with the ongoing advancements in technology and other customer service portals. This is an excellent opportunity to pause and give some thought to how we can improve customer service for the residents of Brantford. And you will note in the report, there is a recommendation for your consideration that staff look at these recommendations carefully and report annually on progress we're making in terms of customer service. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tom and Bruce. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Again, my name is Bruce Pever. I'm partner with KPMG, and tonight I will introduce the report that we provided to the city on customer service delivery. And I'll then turn it over to my colleague, Tom Elfand, who will discuss our findings. So KPMG was engaged by the City of Brantford to undertake a customer service delivery review. The overall goal of the review was to better understand the services being offered to citizens through a centralized delivery model, including the main customer contact center and the front counter at City Hall. We were asked to identify any inconsistencies in service delivery, identify gaps, as well as any opportunities for further expansion or consolidation of services. Specific project objectives included an environmental scan, the identification of potential opportunities for improving customer service, and finally a roadmap for the implementation of a corporate customer service strategy. The work that we conducted over the period of November 13th to December 13th included the project kickoff, and then there was an environmental scan in which we met with frontline staff and management staff. And finally, we prepared a list of opportunities, which we discussed with management and then prepared a final report. As part of our engagement and consultation with staff, we met with the Office of the CAO, Clerk Services, staff within Information Technology, Bylaw Enforcement, Building Services, Operational Services, Parks and Recreation, Property Tax, Public Works, Health and Human Services, and finally, Water Utility Services. Tom?
Thank you, Bruce. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of council. So the work that we did was based on the customer experience maturity model. I'm going to go through the model briefly and then I'll discuss our findings. The 6 areas of the model that we focused on were tools and technology, the people, the organization itself, vision and strategy, customer management, and channels. So with respect to our findings, starting on the left at the top, tools and technology, we found that many of the systems in the organization were disparate and fragmented, not strategically aligned. There was a general lack of mobile technology being used, which if was used would improve efficiencies and eliminate some duplication throughout the organization in many areas. There was also a general lack of performance indicators such as service level agreements in order to measure and identify trends and take advantage of the data that you have. Moving down to the people, middle management that we met with were very positive and showed a willingness to have an increased accountability towards customer service. Frontline staff mirrored that. They lacked a general amount of formal training on some of the systems that they were using. And we found that the IT support staff were spending time helping those frontline staff with their individual specific business applications. Towards the bottom of the page, again on the left, in terms of the organization, we found a general lack of ownership of customer service across the organization. Expectations weren't clearly communicated about the way that the city does customer service with its citizens. And so as a result, there was no performance criteria identified or measured. Moving to the right-hand side, and this is the area that I would suggest is most important to City Council to focus on, the vision and the strategy. First and foremost, because there are no performance levels set, citizen expectations aren't very well measured, and they're not managed. And that it makes it difficult for City Council to make informed decisions about future levels of service. So employees need some better direction on what the organizational goals and visions are so that they are able to have those as a yardstick. In the middle of the page for customer management, contacts with citizens within the municipality aren't measured very effectively. So there's no real clear understanding as to how satisfied your citizens are when they deal with the city of Brantford. Customer surveys are used, but they're rare. We didn't find very many citizen satisfaction surveys being used in the organization, just in a couple of areas. And then at the bottom on the right, the channels. Again, this kind of goes to the mobile technology. You could improve your online services that are available to your citizens and make them more consistent. We did find a use of e-payment options, but it's not consistent across the organization. And that really would reduce your cost of providing service to in-person transactions. In-person transactions are very expensive to carry out. If you had newer technologies, using some of the more modern channels such as chat or live chat or virtual agents, you'd also be able to further reduce your cost per transaction of providing service to your residents. And that summarizes our findings.
So, Mr. Chairman, we'd be pleased to take any questions from yourself or council at this point.
Are there any questions? Councillor McCreary.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Welcome, guys. In the report, it indicated you want to review our the layout for our new city hall. Is that correct?
We did have some discussions with some of the departments who expressed some concerns about the customer flow in the new city hall, but we didn't have an opportunity to review that design, or I didn't see that design or that layout at all.
Okay. And you have some commentary that you offer with respect to our cash handling policies. And I guess you won't know the history because you weren't here, so I won't ask that question. You found that we don't have a point of sale machine downstairs? It's all done from a drawer?
What I found was that there was inconsistencies in the way the transactions were being done at the front counter, depending on whether it was a transaction that related to licensing, maybe marriage or burial permits, for example, or depending on the nature of the transaction. We found inconsistencies in the type of payments that were accepted, whether they be cash, credit, check, Visa, MasterCard, and also inconsistencies with what happened at the end of the day with those transactions, how they were bundled up, so to speak, for deposit or for bookkeeping purposes.
Okay. And were you able to determine whether there's a replacement for the Lagan system?
I think our recommendation indicated that the Lagan system is, we found, going to be end of life in 2021, and that we recommended that the city consider putting out an RFP in 2020 or in early 2021 and look at replacing that system or upgrading it so that you're not caught, with a system that can't be supported.
And you also indicated that there are still some, not every outside caller goes through the customer call center, that some of them go direct to back-end lines. Is that extensive?
Again,
the tax department that was cited, right?
Pardon me, sir?
You cited the tax department, but were there other departments that received direct calls?
There may be. I think that in some cases, departments are working with organizations. Like I know you have, and forgive me, I don't know what it's called, but like there's a special events team that coordinates special events in the city. Thank you. So sometimes, organizations are working with those committees directly. Right. You're never going to get all your calls in your call center. I cited the tax department on purpose because a lot of residents call about property taxes. I'm going to Florida, when are they due? Or they're too much. They never call when they're too little.
Actually, they do. Yes, I'm sure they do. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Our 10 minutes is up. So I would thank you, but certainly remain at the table because we have discussion now and everybody's involved in the discussion under our new format. Next on my list is Councillor Wall.
I'm looking at this objectively. I'm trying to. I appreciate the effort that you guys have expended. I just want to touch on the organization section of this. So I've had a completely different experience with our customer service staff and the staff here. And the industry that I work in has regular communication with City Hall as well. I don't know, maybe it's here somewhere else. Can you tell me, there was a general lack of ownership in most departments for the responsibility to provide excellence in customer service, both to internal and external customers. Can you tell me how you came to that conclusion? Like, were you having like secret shoppers using our services and having those or is it feedback from staff or did you survey residents? Because I agree that you can always improve customer service, but I mean, maybe I'm a counselor and I get special treatment, which I don't think is the case. I think that our customer service staff and our front desk staff and our security, I mean, they always have a smile, they're always courteous, they're always polite, they're always, sorry. I'm coming to the defense of our staff here, but I feel like that, I just want to know how you came to that conclusion.
Thank you, Councillor, through the chair. So it's important when you read the report that you don't identify the comments or findings with particular individuals or with groups of people, for example, frontline staff. What we did find was that all staff within the City of Brantford prioritized customer service and were very focused on providing the best service that they possibly can to the citizens of Brantford. The difference is that how they provide customer service, it is delivered in a vacuum with no standard framework or model or service level standard to deliver the customer service. So no one has a common understanding throughout the organization what is expected with respect to customer service. And it varies from department to department. With Councillor, to answer your specific question through the chair, our findings were based upon interviews with both management and frontline staff. And these were all observations and findings that were provided by those individuals or positions.
What I'm hearing sounds contrary to what you said. How could you judge an external customer service experience without talking to the people who are experiencing the external customer service?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Councillor, I think what we found was that, and maybe it's just semantics in the wording, there was a general lack of ownership in the departments to provide the service. We're not suggesting that the citizens were surveyed or that we talked to them and they felt that they didn't get good service. What we're identifying is the lack of organization, ownership. So that section of the model talks about who owns customer service within the organization. So who is ultimately responsible for the delivery of customer service by every department? Whether that's somebody calling the call center, whether that's somebody whose street is being rebuilt and their sidewalks not the way that it should be, it could be anything. So again, it's about who owns it. And as my colleague said, it's about setting the standards and what are the standards, and so that you can measure against something.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Thank you very much for your presentation. A couple of questions. One is, from your study, what did the average employee think customer service is or should be? I'm sorry for interrupting, but for one department it may be one thing, and to another it may be something quite different. Were you able to pull that information out of the study?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. as we identified in the people section of our findings, the staff had a pretty clear understanding at all levels of not only what customer service was, of course, because we all know that, whether we're going to Canadian Tire or whether we're coming to the city of Brantford. But we have an internal expectation of what that is a good service. Tonight, a perfect example. I checked into my hotel this afternoon. I went in, it was 60 degrees in my hotel. I went back to the front desk and I said, look, I'm really sorry. I don't mean to be difficult, but I can't work in here. It's 60 degrees. She said, oh, no problem. We're so sorry. We'll upgrade you to a suite. And within 2 seconds, I was moved to another room. That's a great service, in my opinion. Somebody else might not think that was great. So I think the point is that unless there's a yardstick or a common tool to measure, staff are struggling to figure out whether they are giving the right level of service that council's directed. And it's really all about what city council wants to establish as a level, because with every level of service, as in everything else that you do, there's a cost that's associated to it.
Thank you for
You're welcome.
The add-on through you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned measurement and inconsistency, and with my background, I think training is a big part of getting people to be consistent, to know what's expected of them, and then to measure, have a baseline, and then you measure it every year to see if you're making progress or not. So how would you, I'm not sure if you can answer this or not, but where would you rate us as an organization with customer service out of 10? 9?
Through you, Mr.
9.5?
Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that is a difficult question because, I met with about 17 different departments in the organization, right? So in terms of the maturity assessment, which is really what we tried to look at, which is what we based our findings on, some departments I think are further along in that maturity assessment than in others. And I don't think that has anything to do with the staff. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, because what I'm really saying is the departments that maybe haven't had the opportunity to be as far along is no reflection on the staff. I think that just by the general nature of what is maybe perceived to be more citizen-facing as a service that the city delivers, council's had an opportunity to focus on that. And so citizens feel, or the staff, I guess, feel we found that they were, further along in that maturity model than maybe other departments where the services are less tangible.
This is great information to move forward. Thank you.
Councilor McCreary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, I wonder if you could explain the problem that manifests with respect to the front door in this building. I'm not sure I understand what the problem is. I think I understand what the solution is. The solution is to open your door at 8:30. Can you elaborate on what you say in this report and tell us what a good thing it is?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify. I think you're referring to the findings that we had when the door was opened early, right? Or the signage, or what exactly specifically are you referring to with respect to the front door?
It's customer contact center in City Hall, and you probably don't have the same page reference that I have, but it's opportunities for improvement. And it says install the system manual or automatic to have the front door locked until 8:15 and then locked at 4:30.
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Chair, it was my experience the first day that I came to meet with staff at the city, the door was open long before 8:30, which at first glance would seem quite welcoming, except you're not open for business until 8:30, at least at the customer service counter on the left when you come into the lobby at City Hall. I can't speak for any of the other departments that are kind of quote unquote behind the scenes. So there's nothing preventing citizens from coming in and walking up and expecting service while staff are trying to get their day started, get their computer system started, get their cash in their cash registers or their drawers or whatever it is that they're using. So we found that by trying to have a little bit more regular hours with respect to that front door, and if there's another opportunity for staff to use a different entrance, it would provide a little more consistency. We said 8:15 because the public, of course, will come a little bit before 8:30, but at least if their hours are posted, as I did see on the doors when we arrived today, so that's awesome. Maybe there's a small area where they can sit and wait. I mean, if I go to the bank and it opens at 9, I can't get in before 9.
Right, thank you. Now, with our new processes tonight, we can ask questions either of the delegates at the table or of the staff, as we ordinarily would in the debate portion. I do have a question for staff, and I'm not sure if there's anybody that's would be aware. We did a cash handling value for money audit probably a decade ago, and what I'm seeing here is the indication that nobody actually paid attention to the cash handling value for money audit. I don't see anybody from Treasury tonight. Is there?
Yeah.
Hello. You may recall that value for money that we did years and years ago, and it did make some pretty strong recommendations regarding cash handling. And the observations here are that we haven't actually implemented some of what that stuff was, and I think we saw the same thing at the Gretzky Center, and I know Mr. Hughes is busy working on that. Can you offer a comment? And no, if you don't have a comment, that's fine too, because I know you probably weren't. It's not your fault. How's that?
A number of the items from the value for money were implemented with costs, and especially over in the previous tax area. And there were TED reports that were analyzed and implemented. As for the new site, I can't comment on that.
Sure. And is there a member of staff that can comment on whether or not we have a replacement in mind for the Lagan system, and when that may be coming on stream?
So I know I talked to Brian Hutchings, CEO. I've talked to the general manager of corporate service about this, a number of the issues, and you can see there has been, she's prepared a list and worked very close with Carol Francis, our supervisor of the customer service area. And there is talk, right now they're just doing the evaluation of the system and potential new systems and going to a formal process and making sure there's a possible budget for it. So we're just at the germination stage, early stage though.
Your time's up, Mr. Councilor McCreary. If you'd like to go back on the list,
I'll let you know. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, gentlemen. You mentioned ownership. Could you unpack that just a little bit more so I have a better understanding of your concept of the phrase ownership? Who owns customer service, where that comes from, where the direct comes from, where the... Just unpack it a little bit more, because I think I have some related questions to it.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So what we found was that while staff generally understood what a responsibility is to deliver customer service, I mean, there's nobody that didn't understand that we met with. What there was a lack of understanding as to who owned it or who was responsible for it corporately. So it's very clear who's responsible for snow clearing. It's very clear who's responsible for maintaining the parks, because they're identified and we can reach out and we can touch that. And we know what department it is. We know what department takes care of planning. But what department is ultimately responsible for setting customer service standards, and or else if they're not met by departments throughout the organization. So who owns that as organizationally? There was some lack of understanding we found throughout the organization when we met with both management and frontline staff as to who ultimately was responsible for that ownership, setting those standards, reporting on the measurements against those standards, that type of thing.
Yeah, my related question is, it's a twofold problem, isn't it? I mean, if we're looking at ownership of customer service standards uniformly across the board in multi-departments and multi-locations, there's an equal, I would say, opportunity for good behavior and good service from the people who require the services. I mean, I think there's a positive correlation between bad behavior and bad service. I might be running out on a limb here, but from my perspective, it's an incumbent upon everybody who's asking for services or information or whatever it is that they require from the city of Brantford or any of its employees, regardless of where the high-risk employees are placed. I would hope that people would be nice or leave. So there's a different standard in my experience and my experience of the different types of services being provided. So you said frontline facing or frequent facing employees in certain areas stand for probably, as I've seen it, experienced it, more abuse than others. So you do have a fluctuating standard for public facing service levels. And obviously you're not going to get a favorable service level report from someone who's unhappy with the service, who is behaviorally, shall I say, challenged, right? So how do you measure that, and how do you compensate for the differences? I understand you're looking for a homogeneous kind of a mixture so that you can compare us with different municipalities and understand where we are our deficit. But how do you account for frontline facing staff at City Hall, at 200 Colburn, and a number of other places where there is high conflict? What do you recommend there?
So, Councillor, through the chair, you're bang on. Like, you got it right. And that is a constant issue when we're examining customer service throughout an organization. And it goes back to the idea of ownership, and accountability throughout the organization for customer service. So how do we go about that? And one of the key tools that we use is service level standards, so that there's a common understanding throughout the organization. What is the service level standard for difficult customers or for high risk customers? And so that when we provide the service, their staff, particularly frontline staff, know what's expected of them and how they can safely deal with such customers.
So we're actually looking to develop that on a council level to give people, our staff, direction as to what they're going to put up with and what they're not going to put up with?
Certainly, that is an approach, yes. That's one of the things that we would recommend that the city take a look at, is adopting a service level standard for dealing with difficult customers, so that staff have an understanding what is the expectation for when they're placed in situations like that.
And every municipality with densely populated urban centers goes through this exercise.
So, you know what? I'm going to turn it over to Tom, because Tom used to be the customer service manager for the city of Windsor.
I'm sorry?
Customer service manager for the city of Windsor before we picked him up at KPMG.
Oh.
And he has lots of experience implementing customer service in a large urban municipality.
We're almost out of time. I can feel it.
We're about almost a minute over, so I'll put you back on the list and we can carry on the conversation. Councillor Van Tilburg?
Yeah, I guess I'll follow through on Councillor Vanderstoel, because he was going where I wanted to go. And so now that you've established that there is a benchmark out there that can be implemented, because I guess you, from your background, would be aware that all different departments have a different level of customer temperament that they're dealing with, but every department can run into difficulties. So when I'm looking at the different buildings and facilities we have to serve, I mean, when you say the doors are open, well, that's not everywhere. Is that correct? Like,
yeah,
we
through
have
you,
some
Mr.
departments
Chair.
that are actually closed and open at the right time.
We didn't look at every of your facilities. My comments were as related to City Hall.
Right, and so, because when I thought of City Hall, and you mentioned that, we have the two right now, the two City Halls, the new one that we're moving into, and we have this one, and this one's not doing multiple functions. So there's more than just the customer service work. There's people like myself, and there's also people coming in and out to do other things. But so that door may or may not have to be open. So would there be you were mentioning different entrances. That would there be consideration then put into the new city hall, which is providing the service delivery, to have those controls, and then a separate thing for where the city hall business goes on, because there's going to be service delivery there. I believe this building is going to be the social services, and I would imagine they will have strict hours. Do you follow me?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I understand what you're saying. Our findings were that staff were using the front entrance of the building, as were the public. And my experience would tell me that that's not always the norm, that there would be a secured entrance, whether staff use their badge, and it's a proximity reader. There's many methods that staff can use to enter, but typically staff would enter, quote unquote, through the back door or through a door that's not the main entrance of City Hall, that entrance is kind of reserved for the public, and that's the hours that is open. So your city staff or counselors or people from agency boards and commissions that need to do business at City Hall, if they're not quote unquote customers, can enter through that secured entrance, get to their workstations and then be ready to receive customers when they arrive.
Very, very good. I'm game for this then. What I'm thinking of, though, is who provides the guidance? Will that be coming through you or through the staff or through a resolution? Will we have a report that says this is what you need to implement for the customer service? At which point do we adopt a model of standardization?
Councillor, through the chair, I think that is a question for your CIO, and I believe they're working on that currently.
Thank you.
If I can speak to that, Mr. Chair, we are working on that. As I said, the OPI, the officer principally in charge of this, is the general manager of corporate services. We've talked about this, and to many of the councillors' questions, the best metaphor for this would be an umbrella, with the core of our customer service being a number of things like tax collection, what have you, setting those standards. But those other elements of the umbrella, like social services, housing, public works, some other things, may have different customer standards to Councillor Vanderstelt's, but they need to be included in the same kind of policy, but not the same standards. But we need to understand that we need to have a customer service framework that defines the various areas, but there is a core service we're providing. So the general manager of corporate services is working on this with her team and looking at making some possible changes to policy, but also to structure and how they do things. So I know that was one of my last conversations before she went on holidays, and as some of you may know, she's off right now she had an accident, and then we'll see where we can pick up on that. So.
Are there any other first-time speakers? Seeing none, Councillor Vanderstelt.
What a wonderful job you're doing as chair tonight. Councillor Sluss, thank you. Gentlemen, thanks again. How about a very specific question? When staff work in isolation, in high conflict situations, how do we protect them from bad behavior? Based on your experience in the city of Windsor, if you experience something like that, how do we protect them?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I can proudly say that you're not unique. There's high-risk citizens in every city, and there's a variety of things you can do. Some of them we talked about in terms of secure entrances to make sure staff are protected. Other times it's, as much as we all don't like it, it's physical barriers. Unfortunately, the days are pretty much gone where you can walk up to a counter that's at waist high and reach across and have physical contact with the person that's waiting on you. That's very unusual in this day and age, as unfortunate as that might be. So a lot of cities are going to almost like what you'd see in a bank, where you've got, protective, whether it's Lexan or glass or whatever it is, and either a cutout or a speaker window, and staff are doing their transactions through an opening if it's frontline in-person transactions.
Has there historically, in your experience, been any use of technology to kind of combat that kind of behavior? Whether it's cameras in all of our locations, recording devices, personal recording devices, is there any credence to that idea?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, almost all of the things you mentioned have been used. I mean, when I was in Windsor, we had cameras everywhere. We had panic buttons that were, went directly to the police, that were silent, so that, the person who is causing the disturbance isn't aware, which can sometimes just exacerbate the situation. Staff can sometimes wear, panic buttons if they're in a high risk situation. I think though, like even during the time that I was at the city, that technology, what it's done is it's allowed people to start to use different channels, which is what we referred to in the report. So the number of people that are actually coming to City Hall for service should be going down. And that was what some of our findings were, that by using some of the more modern channels more consistently across the organization, the number of in-person transactions should go down. And while it's no fun to be yelled at by somebody on the phone, it's a lot safer than somebody standing in front of you.
I totally agree, but we're seeing an escalation of a different type of a different nature here in Brantford, right across the board, through education, right up to the full level of service that we supply citizens of Brantford and beyond. And it's because of that increase in type of behavior, I think the council is duly concerned. Thank you.
Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just I'd like to make a comment, if I may. For the most part, in my 9 years as a councillor, customer service has been pretty good from staff. It's not perfect. It's not 100% all the time, but for the most part, I just wanted to get it out there that the responses are pretty good. And I think it's when there are problems that involve multiple departments or multiple people that it starts to get a little bit more complex and it slows down a bit. So, and I think that can be attributed to your comments about having a system that makes the whole process more consistent citywide as opposed to department by department. So I just want to get it out there that, you guys, for the most part, do a pretty darn good job. So thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you, gentlemen. Having said that, I'll call the vote.
Item 6.1.1, KPMG Customer Service Review Overview, is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Councillors Weaver, Vanderstelt, Utley, Sless, McCreary, Martin, Van Tilburg, and Wall.
Thank you. We're now moving on to our second presentation, which is item 6.1.2. It's an update on the ice jam study. I'd ask that Gus Rungus, Senior Engineer, Water Control Infrastructure, Grand River Conservation Authority, to come forward. The delegates table, please state your name for the public and commence your presentation. As a reminder, you'll have 10 minutes for your presentation, inclusive of questions from members of the committee. If there's time permitting, we will have questions from the members. Please continue when you're ready.
Good evening. Wendy Tu, Full Manager, Design and Construction, and through the chair. With me today is Gus Rungus from the GRCA. He's a Senior Engineer for the Water Control Infrastructures for the Brantford area. And Gus will present a brief presentation of the findings from the KGS Ice Jam study that the GRC completed.
Thanks for the introduction. It's my honor to address this committee. What started out in February 2018 as looked like a fairly large but fairly routine flood event actually ended up as a quite severe ice jam event in Brantford, which caused millions of dollars in damage to both public and private infrastructure, as well as displaced a number of people during the event. So we've been meeting with city staff quite regularly over the last couple of years. We've done a lot of projects, and this presentation is going to give a bit of a recap as well as an update on what work's been done. My one chart with graphs anyway, but basically it was a fairly large event. It was a midwinter melt. We had a couple of inches of rain on top of snow melt, and some previous ice jams in the area actually aggravated the situation. My one chart does show that, again, the flood flows are in the order of 1,000 cubic meters a second, but with the ice jam, it actually backed up water to about 3 times that amount, and did cause some overtopping of the flood dikes in Brantford. Just some visuals. The top picture is in the area of Two Fish Island, which is down by Burkitt's and River Road area. There's a bend in the river there where it basically exits the downtown core of the city anyway. And the lower photo shows the central core of the Grand River through Three Bridges area. It's a police drone image. It's basically sitting right above Lorne Bridge, looking downstream at the other 2 walkway bridges as well as Veterans Memorial. On River Road, again, this is not the typical view. Usually you have about 6 meters or so of a drop down to the river. The ice jam did back up through that area, and it did overtop the flood wall for a period of time through the event. City ice jam flooding extents highlighted in red. Again, most of the impact was on the east side of the river, partly through the Homedale area. Earl Hague, kind of through the central part, was flooded, as well as where the flood wall overtopped through Eagle Place, affecting a number of residences there. I think these are probably direct flood impact as well, but I understand in the Eagle Place area too, the river was up for a period of a couple of days, and there was groundwater flooding as well. So water in the groundwater system backing up and flooding out basements in the area, which caused additional damage. We identified pretty early on a number of projects that had to happen in the area. The text isn't that readable, but basically the 2 gaps, the gaps are areas in the dike where the railway had been in place, where they had to complete the dike to complete the flood defenses there. Central portion, as well downstream in Veterans Memorial, we've been working on protection of the slabs facing the dikes in that area. Removal of the sediment bar, just a little bit further downstream. The River Road flood wall, again, that's the area that overtopped, so there was assessment on that. The Ballantine flood wall, closer to the top portion of the map, there's some repair that need to be done there. The ice jam reach itself focused on Gilkison Flats. The city is carrying on with the Three Bridges EA and just general maintenance and cleanup through the whole thing. So I have identified, again, GRCA has put in quite a bit of work here, as well as the city, and I'll go through some of the projects individually next. Three Bridges environmental assessment, so this is a city initiative, and basically images during the flood events, there was damage to the bridges, so the assessments will identify repairs that need to be done there. Dike gap completion, the 2 dikes, just images of repairs in progress and current state. So both the gaps at Scarf Ave, Grand River Ave, and Civic Center have been now closed, and those are some of the costs that were incurred. The dike slabs remediation, this actually was in the works before the ice jam event. It was about a 5-year project with a number of components, but in the end, it has cost about $1.2 million. The slabs are important. The upper image, not that clear, but there was ice that actually had ramped over the top of the dike there, and the slabs do protect the face of the dike from damage. Flood wall assessments, there's 2 sets of flood walls along River Road through opposite Gilkison Flats, as well as further upstream. So we did hire a consulting firm to actually do a thorough review of the engineering stability of the wall itself after the ice jam, because the ice and the water were up for about a day and a half adjacent to that wall, which is very unusual. And they also looked at preliminary review of the potential for raising the wall, and there is that potential if need be. And the Ballantine flood wall repair as well, this is an area that's a section of wall that had experienced some movement over the past, and we've actually completed repairs of the foundation of that wall as well last year. Just some images of the ice jam aftermath through Gilkison Flats, and some of the cleanup work that has been going on there, both with the trails and some of the vegetation management that's happened there. So directly after the ice jam study, we did actually hire some ice jam experts from KGS. They're renowned in Canada for expertise in all over Canada based on ice jam activity. Part of the reason was just to document the event. It's happened before, but we're in an era of better data now as well. So we wanted to clearly document the event. There was a lot of analysis that was done as well, engineering models that were run just to kind of simulate or try to recreate what had happened, and then a long list of remedial measures that could be done. So some of the mitigation options, again, no-brainer really here, but increasing the dike floodwall protection along River Road is definitely an option. But some of the other ones there then could also be done, and not necessarily as obvious. But things like floodplain relief through Gilkison Flats. Again, the floodplains are there so that water can flow through them, so it actually doesn't go to as high a level. And options in that area might include things like grading and tree management, ice cutting and breaking. Again, there's work that can be done during once an ice jam is setting in, but not necessarily at the peak of the ice jam. So that was looked at. Ice control structures, again, there might be potential to look at ice control somewhere else other than through the downtown core of Brantford. And I think in the past as well, the old Lauren Dam might have provided some of that benefit too in the past, which isn't there anymore. Channel modifications of the Grand River, again, more channel relief and ice storage all the way through the reach. Flow regime modification, things like operating our dams differently to mitigate effects, and then finally flood forecasting improvements. So just highlighting on some of these, again, some views of Gilkison Flats. I won't go into a lot of detail on this, but there's potential to do some tree removal, tree management, as well as some grading, which actually might lower water levels if an ice jam does set in there. And looking downstream a little bit further at River Road and Burkitt's, there's various improvements that could be done, again, with tree management, possible channel realignments, realignments or alterations to River Road itself, because it does partly act as a dike downstream of the floodwall portions of the city, as well as some other improvements that had been looked at after the 1996 ice jam down at the curve at Burkitt's and River Road. So what we're recommending for next steps, and this will be a GRCA project funding, but is a feasibility study. So there are a number of options here that could go forward. They do need more technical work as well. And I think the one thing we learned from the ice jam study, it doesn't seem like there is one thing that can be done, one single project can be done which will eliminate the risk. So the feasibility study really tries to flesh out the options a little bit more and to look at which ones might be, look at what the cost might be, and also which ones to pursue further. So that's my brief presentation.
We've got a minute for questions under the presentation, then we'll go to debate where there's two chances at it. Councillor Van Tilburg.
Okay. The GRCA is responsible for what I would say a broader vision of the river, but I'm more or less focused on the River Road aspect and the wall. So when you mentioned that you could either raise the wall, do you mean raise the wall and grade over on the other side in order, because I'm assuming that channel portion is a lot narrower and that the water's creating more pressure, rises up, comes over the edge, and I think we're maxed out there. So what is it that is most cost efficient? Are we talking about doing one or both, and who makes that call?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I think that's the point of the feasibility study as well, to try to identify what some of the costs might be, as well as kind of what is the best bang going forward as well. Definitely things like any alteration to the river, you have to go through a lot of approvals as well, so it kind of identifies that approval process to actually go through in the future. I think the one thing I would add, though, as well, is a lot of the work that we've done to date has really been maintenance of infrastructure that's already gone through these environmental assessment processes and have been built. So things like raising River Road floodwall would actually be classed as more of a new construction, new capital cost, which would definitely not be solely a GRCA cost.
Thank you for your presentation. We'll now go into debate on the item. It's on the floor, and nobody's on the list. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. One of the suggestions is an ice control structure at the Wilkes Dam. Can you describe what that would look like?
It's a possibility. There are some of these in other parts of Canada. There's one in on the Credit River in Oakville or Mississauga. Basically, what it would look like is a rake. So it would be kind of fingers that go up into the flow, and it would be designed to actually hold back ice as it's flowing down the river.
At what point would it hold the ice? At the dam?
It would be at the location of the structure or upstream of that.
Okay, thank you. Councilor McCreary? That was my question as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. My last term of council, we had a landslide off of one of our roads that run parallel to the Grand River at one of its slower sections below the dam. And we had to shore it back up by dumping about 80 loads of large stone. And we were required, I don't know the governing body that constructed the tax on that, but we were required to, I think, pay out $75,000 in the form of a fish recovery tax, if memory serves correct. So if we should undertake to rechannel parts of the river or rebuild, whatever the case may be, who is responsible for levying that tax against the city of Brantford? Is that a body that I'm not yet familiar with? And as we do this work, are we going to be subject to the same taxes? In your experience?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I think even for the work that we did, like we actually put a lot of stone in the river as well. We did actually get a little bit lucky in that it was an existing structure. There was material there already, so it was just rebuilding what was in place. There can be a couple of places where you have to actually pay fees or do compensation. Part of that could be through the federal government, DFO, so compensation or mitigation costs and plans that have to be done. And there could also be public lands costs as well for new structures.
Okay, so the feasibility study, will the recommendations come back in terms of effectiveness priority so that we would have a better idea of where to spend our money and get our biggest bang for the buck, as you say? And will the recommendations also include the probable taxes associated with those actions?
Through you, Mr. Chair, again, thank you for those comments. We haven't got a terms of reference set out yet, but that would be the intent, basically, is to figure out how do we best spend our money.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming, and thank you for the presentation. I'm going to go through a series of questions. Some of them are going to be pretty basic. So our walls, the flood walls, what are they for?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So basically there's two types of kind of structures, I guess, associated with the dikes. Typically what you see with dikes are earthen dikes. Flood walls are basically kind of narrow, reinforced concrete walls that are used basically if you don't have the space for a full earthen berm. They're a little bit more expensive, but they can get you some elevation vertically.
So, but they're put in place by cities, municipalities for protection, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And they're protecting, property, whether it be public property or city property. So when we're looking at the water course in the Grand River, how is it determined who pays for what? Like, what does the GRCA pay for, and what does the city pay for? And I appreciate it's all paid for by taxpayers at the end of the day, but when we're putting our amount in, how is it determined how much the GRCA puts into these projects?
Through the chair, currently I would suggest that part of the feasibility study is going to bring forth some of those discussions because I know the GRCA currently are looking for funding for some of this work. And so depending on what they receive, and then of course we'll find out what costs are, what kind of funding we could receive, and work through the feasibility study to find out the technical and the cost and the timing.
So the first question I asked was about the wall. I asked that question specifically because you just led me into my third question. So Gilkinson Flats. So that is one of the most beautiful sections of trail that the city has. It was decimated during the ice flood. It's actually pretty sad if you look at the condition it's in. It's definitely a safe trail for use, and it's still beautiful because it's still beside the Grand River, but we lost a lot of our foliage, and there's a lot of destruction in that area. And it's a bit of a pet peeve for me. As much as I love our trail systems, every year that section floods, and every year it gets damaged and more damaged, and to the point where at some point in time the city has to go in there and refurbish things. So when we're talking about the EA, will the EA actually take a look at our trail system? Because again, that's part of city infrastructure that walls are supposed to protect. So will we be looking at moving the walls so that piece of infrastructure of the city is protected? Or will the EA tell us that maybe we need to recede and back that trail away from the water line?
Through the chair, you're correct. The EA will identify some of those things that have been highlighted through the feasibility study. So would it be feasible to bring that into the EA and look at what the costs are? Is it worth changing some of the dynamics and the alignments out there? That would be all part of the EA.
Okay, great. Because as much as I love our trail system, I have a problem with every time it floods, we have to put more money into that trail system, and it's just not sustainable. So that's kind of one of my concerns. So the EA, so we're just going through the terms of reference to get it started. And then obviously there's going to be lots of consultation with the public. Do we have any idea of, as far as timeframes for when the member of the public is going to be able to comment on this?
All right, through the chair. So not to forget that we have to go through the feasibility study first. Okay. So that will take some time, and I'm sure by the time that gets started, probably September before it would probably get really rolling by the time the funding comes into place for the GRCA. That in itself, my assumptions here anticipated a year, and then it would be brought back to council to decide what is feasible technically and cost-wise and timing, and that's when you would start to implement the EAs.
Okay. Thank you very much for your answers.
Councillor Utley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. The question I have is, and I hope it hasn't already been asked, is how were the two gaps closed off? Like they're permanently closed now. What materials did you use to close them off?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, through you. Basically, what we did was there were abutments that kind of flanked the railway there, and so there's a concrete core that was poured between the abutments and then backfilled with material on both sides.
So it's not going anywhere. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wall.
Through you. The Grand River flows into Brantford and it flows out of Brantford. And I just wasn't sure if there was anything in your presentation regarding what happened in Brantford and the correlation to the water that flows in, and then what happened after it left here.
Mr. Chair, no, I didn't really cover that too much in my presentation. Again, the report does go into that in a little bit more detail, but we can talk after if you want.
Oh, okay. I guess there was a lot of, I don't understand exactly what happened to cause this to happen in Brantford. So was it the flood? It wasn't just melting snow, from what I've gathered anyway, is that things transpired in other parts of the Grand that caused it to happen here. So is there anything that's been done to prevent this from happening in other communities before it gets to Brantford?
Through the chair, part of the flood issues here in Brantford was the warm weather, the cold weather, correct, and then how the the flows couldn't get past that, and it was greater volumes of water coming down the Grand River. At that point, I can't say, because all the communities had issues all the way down the ground because of the seasonal weather and water.
I guess, sorry, what I'm looking for is there's communication happening between the communities upstream and downstream to prevent this from happening in all of our communities. And could I get a little bit of information about what that looks like?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, through you. We do have a fairly elaborate flood forecasting system, so it's practiced every year. We issue flood warnings, and those are circulated to municipalities and flood coordinators. So basically, we do have forecast models. We do know what's coming upstream and how things will be, how things will look downstream with the flooding. I think the wild card here is, again, there is a predetermination of the ice to stick in Brantford at the bottom end of Gilkison Flats. It's partly just the alignment of the river. It's partly how the slope of the river changes. So it goes from a steeper to a more gradual river right at Gilkison Flats and the Oxbow behind the landfill. So it's partly just the nature of the topography there as well. So the other thing I wanted to note here was this has happened in the past, almost as severe in 1996. And the common elements there, I think, again, midwinter melts and lots of ice coming down, but also there were previous jams that stuck in place earlier that year as well, about a month earlier, and froze in place very solidly, and that was a common element here. And that's why Brantford was more affected.
So maybe I'm mistaken, but I think I'm not. The Grand River hasn't always looked like this. This is a result of interference by us, not the city necessarily, but people. Has there been any thought to modifying or changing the Grand River in any capacity that would prevent stuff like this from happening? Not obviously, going into Eagle Place and diverting the Grand River, but I mean, they do that. They divert water. So I'm just thinking of all the potential houses, and obviously, if there's my question stands.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Chair, again through you. I think definitely channel modifications is one of the big long list of options. The Grand River will always flow through Brantford, though, probably in the way it is flowing now. I think as well, there are more direct ways. If your sole purpose is to reduce the amount of flooding that can hit the residences, there's more direct ways to do that rather than modifying the channel. That's why they put in a bit of a disclaimer around these channel modification options. If the sole purpose is to reduce ice jamming, it's probably one of the least kind of predictable ways to do it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Are there any other first-time speakers? Seeing none. Second time, Councilor McCreary.
Mr. Chair, thank you. This is a question for staff. Has the City of Brantford made changes to our practices with respect to ensuring that we mitigate our exposure to flood damage?
Through the chair, I can only answer that briefly in regards to, I know our emergency protocol has been enhanced, and so has our communications with the GRCA as far as monitoring the levels.
I'm thinking of our internal communications, so that work that needs to be done in advance of a flood survives changes in municipal leadership. I'm trying not to make the lawyer have a head explosion while I say this.
Through the chair, I don't know if I'm fully understanding the question, but in regards to things like that, we've put in street detours in place.
Closing of floodgates and so on.
Yes,
That's what I'm inquiring about.
Yes.
So we've entrenched that somehow.
I'll let Nella Violin speak
Good
to that
idea.
more.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Nella Violin, Operational Services Director. We have substantially enhanced our protocols for managing the opening and closing of the floodgates.
And could you describe in more detail how that survives changes in departmental management, for instance?
The changes in management currently that just happened in our most recent reorg did not affect those protocols. At this time, there's no change.
What I was trying to be subtle about was indicating that at some point in time, changes in management, that information was not handed over. And I'm wondering how you're going to entrench that information so that when you retire, your successor will know.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is done through standard operating procedures, and those protocols would be personal. They would be embedded in any departmental or sectional responsibility. And that is what we have done. We have a mapping system. We now post for other users to look at the status of each one of the gates internally. And we have created a fairly elaborate set of procedures.
Right. So it's not all here.
When I get
Sorry, I didn't mean to say that you're not all here. Wasn't my intent. No.
If I get hit by a bus on the way out, the knowledge is there.
God
and
forbid.
it's in a thing.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much.
Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Has any thought been given to what we almost have, a natural relief valve at the Lorne Bridge? So feeding into Shallow Creek Park, feeding into Mohawk Lake, and feeding back into the Oxbow, albeit a bit of a trickle right now. Will the feasibility study or the EA entertain any options to open up that access so that not only additional flows can go through those areas, but also provide a bit of relief should this type of flood happen in this location again before we can get our bridges down?
Through the chair, and I can't answer directly to that, but certainly those are things that would be looked at through an EA process.
When do we expect EA completion on this?
Well, currently we're the GRCA is just starting their feasibility study, which I suspect won't start till about September. That's going to probably take a year, and an environmental assessment would come sometime after that. So a completion would be, again, a few years after that time.
Okay, but you do believe that it may be part of the recommendations that may come forward?
Through the chair, we could identify that to be looked at through that process.
Okay, please do. Thank you.
Okay.
Further discussion? Councillor Van Tilburg.
I think Councillor Vanderstel's made an interesting observation there. I don't remember the height that diversion would be at, because I think we needed the dam prior, but if you can find out the information, if the water was actually that high at that location, then that becomes very interesting. So I just don't want somebody to say, no, it's way the heck up there, you can't do it. I would like to know, was it that high at that point? Because I know everybody was looking downstream at where the congestion was happening, and it was raising there, but it could have been that high, that far back. I mean, it certainly was high enough at the Lake access point. So, yeah, don't lose track of that. That could help us in some other issues coming forward, too.
Mr. CAO.
Can I just jump in here for a second? Just want to say something. I mean, I'm new here. I've been here for about 6 months, and some of the questions regarding the river and the coordination of developing systems. And I think there's been a lot of systems developed since 2017 that pass on to other people in this organization. I'd liken it the weekend of January 10th and 11th. We had a major melt. I was stunned and blown away with the staff commitments. The emails over the weekend from Nello and his team, from Selby and her team, and from Grand River Conservation Authority. Afterwards, we had a debrief on just all weekend long, back and forth, making sure there wasn't any flood concerns. There was, and shutting down roads over Gilkison Flats and what have you. But the team effort between multiple parties was unbelievable. And even afterwards, finding out later, to Councillor Wall's question, that I believe, I could be wrong, you're going to have to correct me from the GRCA, this is what was reported to us at the Emergency Operations Center on the Thursday afterwards, that 54% of the water was diverted, was reservoired by the GRCA. That wasn't reservoir. That whole team effort didn't happen. We would have a lot of flooding in this community. But the combination of our team and GRCA and other upstream municipalities working together, we avoided a lot of catastrophe in the city. So we're getting there. Our process systems aren't perfect yet, but we certainly are working with multiple partners to get there, so just want to pass it on.
Thank you. And thanks for your presentation. Seeing no further questions, I'll call the question on the motion.
Item 6.1.2, update to ice jam study is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Councilors Weaver, Vanderstelt, Utley, Sless, McCreary, Martin, Van Tilburg, and Wall.
Next item up is 6.1.5 Mohawk Lake and Mohawk Canal Cleanup Rehabilitation Project Update. I believe it was Councilor Martin that separated that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under medium to long-term remedial measures, the non-structural members, the last item is undertake a focused cross-connection investigations of the area around Rodden Street and Bruce Street. That needs to be one of the first things done because that undoes everything that's done if that's not addressed. So why is this listed as medium to long term when it should be the first item?
Through Mr. Chair, which item exactly?
The last item, under the heading non-structural measures for medium and long term.
Yeah.
The last item, undertake focused cross-connection investigations.
Yeah.
That needs to happen first. Because if the cross-connections are allowed to continue, once the cleanup starts, it's just going to be contaminated again, and the money's going to be wasted.
Could I please get the delegation to identify yourselves, please?
Nahat Kapin, Senior Project Manager, Design and Construction. The last item is already considered by Environmental Services, already ongoing, but this is listed as long-term because it should be continuously done. And it's not just as short-term and completed, it should be done continuously.
Okay, so it will be done before work starts, but it'll be redone?
Yes.
Okay, that makes more sense then. Thank you.
Any further questions on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
Item 6.1.5 Mohawk Lake and Mohawk Canal Cleanup and Rehabilitation Project Update is approved on a recorded vote of 7-1. Those in favor, Councilors Weaver, Vanderstelt, Utley, Sless, McCreary, Van Tilburg, and Wall. Those against, Councilor Martin.
Thank you. The last item up is 6.1.9 Brantford's Canada Day Celebration 2020. I believe Councilor Utley had a conflict with this item. Any discussion on it? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
Item 6.1.9 Brantford's Canada Day 2020 celebration is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Councilors Weaver, Vanderstelt, Sless, McCreary, Martin, Van Tilburg, and Wall, noting Councilor Utley's pecuniary interest.
Thank you. That takes us to resolutions, and the first resolution is 7.1. Councilor Wall.
Thank you. Moved by myself and seconded by Councilor Utley. 7.1, rededication of the Art Stambridge Walkway. Whereas Art Stambridge is a former Brantford City Councillor who served as Ward 2 Councillor from 1971 to 1982, and whereas much of the work Mr. Stambridge accomplished during his time as Councillor focused on the revitalization of the downtown area, And whereas the elevated pedestrian walkway above the right-of-way for the street known as Mill Street, connecting the west end of the Market Center Parkade to Colburn Street, was dedicated and signed as the Art Stambridge Walkway upon its initial construction. And whereas the signs that indicated the dedication were removed during construction of the Laurier YMCA, now therefore be it resolved. A, that the pedestrian walkway connecting the Market Center Parkade to the Laurier YMCA be rededicated as the Art Stambridge Walkway. And B, that corporate communications staff be directed to work with Wilfrid Laurier University and Operations Services to reinstall the commemorative signs and invite Mr. Stambridge, friends, and family to celebrate at the unveiling ceremony. And C, that the cost of the signs be funded from the Operational Services account, traffic signs, and pavement marking. Can I speak to this? Thank you. So, as many people know, I grew up in the downtown core, and my friends and I don't know, I always had a fascination with that walkway just because of the outlook over downtown, and it's a unique piece of construction in the core, and things just kind of stick with you. You know, for example, I spent a lot of time as a kid in Charlie Ward Park. I never really knew who Charlie Ward was. I just knew it was Charlie Ward Park. It's the same thing as this Art Stambridge walkway. I had no idea who Art Stambridge was at the time. And when I got elected, one of the things that greets when you walk up the stairs is portraits of former councillors, many of whom at this table are on that wall, on the regular wall, but then there's the wall of fame or wall of recognition, and there's Art Stambridge, and everything kind of clicked. That's who that guy is. And as a resident, you know, somebody who's constantly in the downtown core, I noticed that the Art Stambridge walkway wasn't there anymore. And I thought to myself, why? And it didn't make any sense, so I kind of went around City Hall and I was knocking on some doors. And basically, there's not really an answer to why the rededication the dedication went away. It was just during the construction of the YMCA, for whatever reason, it never got put back up. And as much as earlier tonight we did the moving of the Crystal Cottage because you have to pay recognition to the heritage structures, it's important to pay recognition to the people who helped build the Brantford that we live in today. And Art Stambridge was one of those gentlemen, and I'm just happy that we're able, to rededicate this in his name. Because, from everything I've read about the guy, he was just a great person who cared a lot about the city, much like the people in this room and the staff that work for us here. So I hope I can get unanimous support on this, and I imagine I will. So thank you.
Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'd like to thank Councillor Wall for bringing this resolution forward. Art served this community with distinction over many years and goes down of one of the old-time greats that served our city. So I'm very pleased and proud to second the motion, and I think it's appropriate with all the things going on downtown that Art Stambridge will be remembered in a very good way. So.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
Yeah, I want to thank Councillor Wall for noting this oversight. I guess my question is to staff is who took the signs down? Was that us, or was that just happened in the construction, Laurier?
Through Chair and the General Manager of Public Works, we feel that it was taken down during the construction of the Y.
But who did that? Were we notified to remove it, or was it taken down by the private party?
Through the Chair, we're not sure when that was taken down.
So we don't have any record of it going down. All right, I just, sometimes those are things that we do need to be on top of. If we took it down, then we put it up. If they took it down, they should pay to put it up. Thing is, it's got to go up. I think it's a great recognition. In fact, it's funny that it's not until something like this happens that you actually get a second chance to figure out who is this person and why. So I think there's a benefit to that and to the rededication, and I'll be happy to support it, and I'm sure it'll be unanimous.
Further discussion? Oh, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I too would like to thank Councillor Wall for catching this. It's unfortunate that the signs came down in the first place. I've had many conversations with Mr. Stambridge. He is a fine gentleman, and I consider him a friend. And
I'll be looking forward to this rededication and hope to talk to him again there. Thank you.
Further? No? Seeing none, I too would like to thank Councillor Wall. I've met Art on a number of occasions, and a fine gentleman, and very well deserved to have his name up downtown because he did do a lot of work downtown, and it's appreciated. Having said that, we'll call the question.
Item 7.1, rededication of the Art Stanbridge Walkway is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Councillors Weaver, Vanderstelt, Utley, Sless, McCreary, Martin, Van Tilburg, and Wall.
Councillor Martin, I believe you have Councillor Antosky's resolution.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
If you could move it, please.
Yeah, I move seconded by Councillor Vanderstelt. Whereas Chapter 15 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code establishes the composition of various committees of the whole and standing committees, and whereas the Social Services Committee and Finance Committee are standing committees of City Council, and whereas the Council of the Corporation of City of Brantford is required by various statutes, bylaws, agreements, and resolutions to appoint or recommend one or more members of Council to various committees, boards, and task force. And whereas Council at its meeting held on November 19th, 2019, appointed Councillor Antosky to the Finance Committee and Councillor Carpenter to the Social Services Committee through Bylaw 179-2019, and whereas Councillor Antosky and Councillor Carpenter have made a mutual decision that Councillor Antosky would like to be appointed to the Social Services Committee and Councillor Carpenter would like to be appointed to the Finance Committee. Now therefore be it resolved that a bylaw to amend Schedule A of Bylaw 179-2019 to change the composition of the Social Services Committee and the Finance Committee to represent the above be requested be presented to Council for adoption. And just speaking to this briefly, at the time when Council committees were selected, Councillor Carpenter chose to switch committees, and because it's one member from each ward on each of these committees, it forced Councillor Antosky onto Finance, and they've come to a mutual decision to reverse that and go back to the committees they were on previously.
Councillor Weaver?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for the clerk, actually. I'm curious as to why this wouldn't be considered out of order. So our bylaw 15.2.19 talks about social service committee and the composition, and at the bottom of that bylaw, it talks about members shall be appointed annually. So we've done that already, so this is an addition too. So I would support this, but to me it sounds like we should be waiving the rules because the bylaw stipulates a process we use to pick people for committees, and we're going beyond that. So again, this is something I'll be happy to support. I'm just curious as far as process, if this should be a waive the rules, and then we can approve it rather than just a resolution. So again, it was 15.2.19, and it talks about who it consists of, and then it talks about if someone's absent, the other councillor would take over as an alternate, but then it does talk about members shall be appointed annually, and at the end of each term of appointment, continuation of members of the next shall require agreement by councillor and wardmate. So I'm just, again, if that's not the case, again, happy to support this, but I was just curious as to process.
Yeah, so just through you, Chair, in regards to that. So yeah, we do appoint the councillors on an annual basis, and under the city's procedural bylaw, we will appoint the members themselves. It doesn't require a waiving of the rules because they provided a notice of motion associated with the respective switch. Further to that as well, it was a mutual agreement that they had come to. If there was any conflict thereof, there would be the potential that this would not be something that we could do, but we can go back and amend that bylaw that appropriately placed them where they were, and have them come forwards on the committees they'd like to see sit on for the remainder of the year.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Councillor McCreary.
Thank you, Chair Celeste. I think it's incumbent on the two sponsors of this resolution to actually be in the room when it's debated and voted on. I'd like to hear from both of them, with respect to what's going on and why they're changing. I know we've heard from Councillor Martin, but he's not either of the two proponents. So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that we defer this until both councillors be in the room for the debate.
Seconder? Councillor Utley? In place?
The next time they're both in the room at the same time, which would probably be next week, I guess.
Next week? Okay. Call the question.
The deferral of the item 7.2, Social Services and Finance Committee composition, is approved on a recorded vote of 7-1. Those in favor, Councillors Weaver, Utley, Sluss, McCreary, Martin, Van Tilburg, and Wald. Those against, Councillor Vanderstelt.
There are no notice of motions. Seeing no business before this committee, we are adjourned.